I remember my grandmother used to tell me about Christmas mornings from her childhood. She'd wake up to find a stocking at the foot of her bed, and inside would be an orange, a fruit she might only taste once a year, along with some nuts. And that was her Christmas. And 70, 80 years later, she could still describe exactly how that orange smelt, how it felt in her hands, and the pleasure that it gave her. Think about that for a moment. Your grandparents, your parents, and you all woke up to completely different Christmas mornings. Not because your families loved you differently, but because Christmas gifts have always been mirrors, reflecting the world people were actually living in, the technology that existed, the economy they were navigating, and the design movements shaping their lives. This is how society decided what really mattered, I guess. Sometimes gifts were about joy, sometimes they were about survival, and sometimes, honestly, they were about a plastic toy that broke spectacularly before New Year's Eve, or even before the end of Christmas Day. So today, we're travelling through a century of Christmas mornings to discover what people actually unwrapped, and what those objects quietly reveal about who we were. So that story my grandmother told me about would have happened in the 1910s, when Christmas wasn't really about excess. For most families, gifts were handmade out of necessity. You get scarves, gloves, knitted socks maybe, things you genuinely needed to survive the winter. If you received something store-bought, it was designed to last you a decade. Early cameras started appearing as aspirational gifts for wealthier families, but they were expensive novelties. A much more common luxury was something like, a safety razor. Sounds spectacularly unromantic, I know, until you realise it replaced the lifetime of straight razor sharpening and weekly trips to the barber. Progress isn't always glamorous. And then there were the trench watches. Now, these didn't start as Christmas gifts. They were military equipment. Basically, soldiers took their pocket watches, which are really unpractical when you're in the trenches, and soldered brackets on so they could strap them to their wrists. But families back home soon realised that these watches could be sent as Christmas parcels to loved ones on the front. Often they'd tuck in a lucky charm inside the package, a coin, maybe a photograph or a religious medal, hoping somehow to keep their sons and brothers safe through the next winter of war. After the armistice, those same watch designs quietly crossed over into civilian life, and yes, sometimes ended up wrapped under a Christmas tree. After the war ended, jazz arrived, and suddenly Christmas gifts got shiny. The 1920s worshipped style. Cocktail shakers became popular gifts because American Prohibition had made drinking both illegal and wildly fashionable across the Atlantic. Jewellery embraced geometric designs, decorative cigarette cases turned a health hazard into an art form, and wireless sets were transformative. Imagine gathering your entire family around a glowing wooden box and hearing voices from 100 miles away. That was basically magic with valves. This was the first era where design itself became part of the gift. Art Deco lines, symmetry, chrome finishes, and deliberate elegance. Objects weren't just functional anymore. They were small statements about who you wanted to be, sophisticated and modern. The kind of person who owned a really nice cigarette case, apparently. And then, quite suddenly, everything tightened. During the Great Depression, Christmas didn't disappear, but it transformed. Gifts became relentlessly practical. Clothing, books, durable household items. And parents mastered the art of saying, you'll really get use out of this when gifting socks. Homemade toys made a comeback. Wooden cars carved by hand, rag dolls stitched from old fabric, board games copied onto cardboard because nobody could afford the real thing. And here's what's interesting. Many people who grew up during this era later said that these were some of their most meaningful Christmases. Not in spite of the hardship, but because effort replaced expense. Because imagination, it turns out, scales better than money. Then came World War II and wartime rationing, shortages and remarkable ingenuity. Gifts were often improvised, handwritten letters or baked goods with carefully hoarded sugar, or small handmade keepsakes. If you received something new, you treasured it. If you received anything made of metal, you basically won Christmas. But after the war ended, Christmas exploded back into optimism. Chrome-plated appliances appeared like visitors from the future. Toasters, mixers, vacuum cleaners, you name it. These weren't just tools, they were promises. Promises of a modern life, of convenience, of a future where housework took minutes instead of hours. Every gleaming appliance said, the hard years are over. This is also when affordable wristwatches truly became a classic Christmas gift. Brands like Timex and Ingersoll made watches accessible to ordinary families. No longer luxury items, but practical everyday tools. Practical, symbolic, and deeply personal. A watch said your time matters now, and after years of wartime uncertainty, the message landed differently. And so we reached the 1950s, which may well have invented the Christmas morning we still recognise today. Toys took absolute centre stage. Barbie arrived in 1959 and immediately sparked debates about consumerism and body image, but mostly sparked arguments about who got to play with her first. Train sets circled sitting room floors in elaborate loops, and kitchens filled with pastel-coloured appliances that somehow all promised happiness through colour coordination. Advertising played an enormous role here. The idea of the perfect Christmas morning, smiling families in matching pyjamas, glowing trees, actual mountains of wrapped gifts, was carefully constructed by marketing departments. And once you've seen that image, once those expectations exist, they're incredibly hard to roll back. This then was the decade that turned Christmas into a cultural event you could actually fail at. Then, by the 1960s, the future had arrived, and it looked suspiciously like outer space. Colour televisions became the ultimate status gift, turning living rooms into small theatres. Then there were futuristic toys with antennas and flashing lights which filled catalogues. Everything looked like it might blast off at any moment. Even everyday objects embraced rounded shapes and bold colours, because if your coffee maker didn't look like, well, vaguely space age, were you even trying? Behind the scenes, watchmakers were quietly experimenting with quartz technology. It wouldn't quite arrive until the next decade, but the groundwork was being laid for the biggest revolution in timekeeping since the mechanical watch itself. Christmas was starting to feel technological in a way that previous generations would have found utterly bewildering. Then the 70s dawned, and along with it came the digital revolution, and it changed everything. Calculators became wildly popular gifts, which seems odd now, but imagine never having to do long division by hand again. Yeah, great, wouldn't it? Digital watches felt like something beamed back from the year 2000. The Hamilton Pulsar, with its glowing red LED display, arrived in the early 1970s, looking genuinely futuristic. And by the late decade, Casio and Seiko were making digital watches affordable enough to appear under Christmas trees across the country. And Star Wars toys absolutely dominated Christmas mornings after 1977, causing more Christmas warfare than perhaps any toy line in history. The force was strong, but so was the desire to own all the 17 action figures. Designs in the 1970s were bold, blocky, unapologetically electronic. Even the packaging embraced angles and metallic text. Owning technology wasn't just useful anymore, it was a kind of identity. You weren't just a person, you were a person with a digital watch and possibly a pocket calculator. The future was now, and it beeped. The 1980s turned Christmas into pure cultural theatre. Portable music arrived via the Walkman, fundamentally changing how people experience sound. Suddenly, you could carry your entire music collection on your belt, assuming you owned about 40 cassette tapes, that is. Game and watch handhelds quietly trained an entire generation to stare at small screens while walking into the future. Boom boxes became neighbourhood status symbols and noise violations simultaneously. Everything was louder, brighter, more colourful. Neon aesthetics ruled, and for the first time, pop culture franchises completely dominated gift culture. You weren't just buying a toy, you were buying membership in a fandom, a tribe, an identity. Were you Transformers or G.I. Joe? Nintendo or Sega? These were serious philosophical questions in 1987. So, if the 1980s were loud, the 1990s were relentlessly commercial. Shopping malls became December pilgrimage sites. Tamagotchis beeped at you every 3 hours, demanding attention or threatening death. Game Boys survived more drops, spills and sibling attacks than any device had a right to. And colourful accessories, especially watches, became expressions of personality rather than just tools for telling time. This was peak, I hope they still have one left, Christmas shopping energy. The frantic search, the waiting lists, the elaborate schemes to secure that year's hot toy. Parents developed combat-level strategies for navigating toy store crowds. It even came up in movies at the period. It was chaos, but it was organised, commercial chaos. By the 2000s, gifts had become smaller, smarter, and increasingly digital. Phones absorbed everything: cameras, music players, calendars, and eventually even watches. Why give someone 5 separate gifts when one device does everything? Smartwatches then arrived, blurring the line between jewellery and computer, and tablets replaced bookshelves. And then subscription gifts appeared: streaming services, curated boxes, experiences instead of objects. Today, sustainability and minimalism increasingly shape what people want. Sometimes the most meaningful gift isn't wrapped in paper at all. It's something that updates silently overnight, or an experience shared together, or even just not buying something because we already own too much, maybe. So we've taken a journey from hand-knit scarves to digital stockings, from oranges that appeared once a year to devices that contain every song ever recorded. Christmas gifts have always told us who we were, what we valued, what we hoped for, what we thought the future might look like. And maybe, just maybe, your grandmother's orange wasn't such a bad gift after all.
So, whatever you get or give for Christmas this year, I hope you have a really good one, and thanks for watching. Happy Christmas, everybody. Bye-bye.
Ho, ho, ho! Special delivery for you! Oh, wow! Is that what I think it is? An Omega Speedmaster. Thank you!